Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Rasko, thank you for inviting us to this conference. We are always happy to present visa procedures, Schengen, and some common points that are useful for you, that you won't have problems with visas. I work at Consular Department of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This department is mainly competent for Schengen visa procedures for foreigners which are traveling to Slovenia. My presentation will be based on different topics, but in general we will talk about the general information about Schengen, obligation of Slovenia as member state, what kind of visa procedures are in China, and ADS agreement between EU and China, and maybe the most important, the future developments and some changes which will be going on in the next few years on this field. As you probably all heard about Schengen. Schengen area is, you can see it on the picture, is this area of states. These states came together, signed an agreement, and they are all implementing the same rules for Schengen procedures, for visa procedures. That means that all the procedures, all the documentations, all the background, all the information systems are the same. So you really should look at this area as a whole. Croatia, Bulgaria and Romania are left out of Schengen for now, but we believe that in the next 2, 3, 4, maximum 5 years, they will join the Schengen as well. Also, the Cyprus as a member of EU is not member of Schengen, and there are some other countries that are not member of EU, like Norway, Switzerland, Iceland, are in Schengen but are not in EU. What does it mean, common visa procedure? Firstly, it means the same legal basics. There are 2 regulations. We will not go into detail because there is no time and I don't want that you fall asleep. But there are 2 regulations. It's number 539, that's visa regime. In this regulation, there is written which countries are visa obliged and in which countries are left out of visa regime. This regulation is changed. The latest change was this year when United Arab Emirates were put into the section of this regulation, and they are visa free from March 2014. Regulation 810 is more operational document. It's written very in humane way, that I say, understandable way. It says how visa procedures are done, what is the time frame, what kind of visas are there. So these 2 are the basics for Schengen visa procedures. What are the implementations of common Schengen procedures? As I said, it's common area, and it means that foreigners can travel with Schengen visa, can travel through all these states. Of course, if this visa is valid. Positive things are also representation agreements. That means if we don't have embassy in, I don't know, in Morocco, we can arrange with other Schengen state that represents us in that country. As we will see later, also in China we have a lot of these agreements, and we have a lot of provinces that are covered with these agreements. Also, as I mentioned, there are general rules for lodging an application, and we will talk about it a little bit later. In China, first we have embassy. That is the most important thing, that in country we have embassy. It's in Beijing, but beside that we have a lot of agreements, as you can see, with Austria in Shanghai, Germany in Guangzhou, Hungary in Chongqing, obviously, okay, Germany, Hong Kong, Portugal in Macau, and Hungarian commercial office in Taipei. So this does not mean that the other provinces are left out. As we can see in this table, the Austria also covers these provinces, Hungary, those provinces, and all provinces which are left out are then covered with Slovenian embassy. And if you look at the map of China, we can see that all major cities and provinces are covered with with our embassy and with representation agreements. What's important about visa procedures? Maybe the first thing, the colleagues talk about different structures of Chinese tourists or Chinese travelers. One of them are, of course, officials and diplomats and other high-ranking Chinese. And Slovenia is one of the few countries which has bilateral agreement with China that exempts holders of diplomatic and service passport holders for visa regime. That means they don't need visa to come to Slovenia, but there is one catch. If they're traveling through other Schengen state, which does not have this kind of agreement, they will have to receive Schengen visa from that state. So, because of the poor airline connections, the only possibility is through Istanbul, Moscow, and maybe London and some other cities. The time frame is very important. The applications must be lodged, this is written rule, at least 15 calendar days before the travel. This does not mean that if someone comes to embassy and say I must travel in 5 days, that we will say no, you cannot travel, you didn't come 15 days before. I just say this is general rule, but there are exemptions and a lot of exemptions. Maybe the most important thing about Schengen, you must know that you cannot go to Austrian embassy in Beijing and say I'm traveling to Germany. No, you must go to German embassy and apply there for Schengen visa. This is one of the main rules, which will be a little bit liberalized in the future, but for now it's still valid. This is connected also with consular territorial competence. This means if you're a citizen of China and are visiting India, for example, you go to Slovenian embassy in India and say, oh, I want to travel to Slovenia. They will say, because of this rule, no, you must apply in China, because you're a resident of China, and you must apply there. So that also applies for the country. China is big. So if someone is living in Shanghai and comes to Beijing and say, I want to travel to Slovenia, we will say no, because in Beijing we have a visa we have arrangement with Austrian General Consulate, so you must go to them and they will issue a visa. Of course, there are examples, there are exemptions from that rule, I don't know, from some business trips, for some humanitarian reasons, because of security reasons and so on and so on. Visa procedure, it's also written rule, takes maximum 15 working days. Of course, a lot of countries finish visa procedure in less days. Among them is also Slovenia, which is known that visa procedures are done, if everything is okay, the visa procedure is done in 1, 2, 3 or 4, maximum 5 working days. Special attention needs to be given to harmonized supporting documents. As I said earlier, Schengen also means that the visa procedure but is the same for all countries, and that applies also to supporting documents that applicant must present when he or she is applying for visa. Harmonized supporting documents, in some countries the list is 5 points, in some countries the list is 10 points, and in some countries the list is long, I don't know, 10 pages. So that differs from country to country. In China, there is harmonized supporting documents. It is a EU Commission decision. It's official, and these documents are published on every site of Schengen states embassies. So you can see them there. One of the main rules of Schengen is also personal appearance. If someone is traveling first time, then this person is obliged to go in person to embassy and present documentation. Of course, we have exemptions. We'll talk about ADS agreement that states that if there are tourists which are traveling in this scheme, the personal appearance is not required. Of course, the competence of every embassy is to, if there's something wrong with documency or anything, they can say 2 people from this group must come to embassy and we must do the interview. And at last, the VIS. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but VIS means Visa Information System, and it will go live in May 2015. What is VIS? VIS is capturing of biometric data. This is a decision of EU states, of Schengen states and EU Commission, and implementation of VIS goes regional. So the China will be included into this VIS in May. The problem is because if you take biometric data, then that means that the person must come to you. You cannot take documentation by mail. You cannot take documentation by agency. You must ask the applicant to come to you and give personal data. Of course, that can be a problem for a lot of people. Because of that, there is a possibility that Schengen states have written in their legislation that we can cooperate with outsourcing partners. That means that companies which main occupation is handling with visas can sign an arrangement with Schengen state, and in the name of that Schengen state they can take, beside of applications, also the biometric data. The problem is that in China, the China government demands that if we sign this kind of arrangement with outsourcing partner, that in that province we must have consulate. So that means that for now, Slovenia can sign only this kind of contract with outsourcing partner for the province or city of Beijing. So that's a problem. We are talking about that with China, so hopefully we will resolve that problem. Main challenges and procedures in China. In the past years, the main challenge was immigration risk of applicants. This risk is less and less attractive, and Chinese citizens are going higher on this scale. So there is no, this migrational risk is not more. It's okay.
No, it's backing. It's not.
Yes, it's
It's okay.
It's in the admin. It's in the admin.
Oh,
Okay.
Cleaning.
The big problem is false and forged documents. So that's one thing you as a tourist companies must take into account, that all the documentation which is handed to you doesn't mean that it's okay. All the documentation is then checked and looked at it, and if it's false, it is forged, then you as a company can have a problem because you accepted those documents and forwarded it to the embassy which is doing the visa procedure. The other problem is using Slovenia as excuse to travel to other Schengen countries. Why? Because, as I said earlier, Slovenia finish visa procedures in, I don't know, 2 days. If you go to Germany, in some countries you have to wait 1 month to receive an appointment. And when you come to appointment, you have to wait 15 days because the visa code says 15 days. The Germans are strict, the colleagues will elaborate. And Slovenia is faster than other countries. Why? Because we have less applicants and less applications. And sometimes the foreigners are using that to, or they want to use that to come to other Schengen states. That is connected with the next point, which is Slovenia is not the main destination. How we can find that? Very easy. In the interview, applicants don't know where they're traveling. If they say they're traveling to Slovenia, our consular officer says, where are you traveling? Oh, I don't know, a little bit around. Where around? Oh, they're around Paris. And no, that's not Slovenia. Oh, that's not Slovenia. Okay. A lot of travelers don't know the main purpose of the travel. They say they're traveling like tourists. You say, where are traveling like tourists? Where will you stay? What will you be doing in Schengen or in Slovenia? And they don't have a clue. And the last thing is misuse of visas. Using the visas for work in Schengen or illegal stays. That is the quite big problem. And of course the asylum procedures. But as I said, the China is going up on this scale, and all these problems are decreasing year by year. So hopefully next few years there will be these few reasons will be crossed out from this. A little bit about ADS agreement. As I said, this is an agreement between European Communion and China, exactly the National Tourism Administration. Applications can be submitted by a accredited courier of Chinese tourist agency. Firstly, this Chinese agency must be accredited by this tourism administration, and after that it must be accredited also by one of the Schengen states. Not all of the Schengen states, but by one of the Schengen states. Every company then receives two accreditations for couriers, and they can launch applications for this company. The ADS agreement talks about the groups must be contained of at least 5 tourists, and the visa can be issued for maximum of 30 days. A little statistics. In 2013, Slovenia issued 753 visas for Chinese citizens. From that, 220 visas for tourists, and from that 220, only 183 ADS tourist visas. Austria in Shanghai issued 220 visas for Slovenia, Hungary 8, and Germany 6. So, maybe one story from last summer. Some reporter from Slovenia wanted to do a story, and she asked us, why don't you issue more visas? Why don't you issue 10,000 visas for Chinese citizens? The market is big. Why are you holding back the tourists? And we said, because they don't come to us. We can issue so much visas. And if you look at the number of all visas, it's 753 visas in 2013. So the majority of visas are issued on the base of business trip, not tourist visits. So if they will come to us, we will do the procedures. But if they don't come to us, we can do the procedures. That's the simplest as it gets. Future challenges on this field. As I said, implementation of VIS system, the biometric capturing data. Maybe one positive thing, that doesn't mean that every time that applicant is traveling, they must come to embassy. No. Only first time, and then 59 months he or she is safe, because this data is kept in the Schengen server for 59 months. Cooperation with Schengen, with outsourcing partner, as I said earlier, we are trying to sign the contract and talking to Chinese officials to open these kind of centers around China, mainly because of VIS system, so that they can also take the fingerprints in our name and send it to us. Maybe one other thing that is before the modification of visa code, also the online visa applications. We have this system in Russia and some other countries, India. That means that the applicants can put the data into the web application, and this data comes to our embassy. But of course, that doesn't mean that applicants don't need to they don't need to present the application. Application is also written in Schengen legislation. So for now, it's just to speed up the procedure. This web application will be in next 2 months, next few months. Also, will also go live in China. So. And the last thing, modification of visa code. It was mentioned a little earlier. There are some liberalization processes in Schengen visa procedures. Abolition of 2 entry visas, and there is only 1 and multiple entry visas. Slovenia is one of the countries which is one of the top 3 countries which is issuing multiple entry visas. So we'll do that in future also in China, so I don't see that there's a problem from our side. Maybe just one information, when in Russia we also have a lot of tourist companies and cooperation with tourist agencies. When we started 2 years ago, when we started to issue a lot of multiple Schengen entry visas, these tourist agencies were very mad at us because they were losing business because of that. And if you issue Schengen visa for 1 year and multiple entry, they don't get the money for every trip. So this policy is 2 sides of story. The changes of visa code will also include some rules for more visas with longer period of stay. It will say that if someone has already traveled, I don't know, 3 or 4 times and the visas were used in accordance with law, automatically receives 2 or 3 years visa.
That's not true.
Not yet.
I'm sitting here, that's not true what you're talking. And also what you're talking before. I'm doing with China for 5 years, and please tell us the true stories about it.
Okay, then I'm a liar. Okay. No problem. And of course, there will be more liberal regime for issuance of visa at the border. So, issuance visas at the border is in competence of police. They have very strict rules about that, and these rules will be a little bit softer in the future. So, in short, that's it, and I believe we'll come back when there are questions.